What's up, everybody? It's Soren Baker here on Unique Access Entertainment. As always, please hit that subscribe button. It's right down there and it's free. That enables us to keep coming to y'all as often as possible with as many interviews as possible. So please hit that subscribe button, like our content, share it, talk about it, be about it, each one, teach one. And we appreciate your support and getting us this far. And while you're down there, if you haven't already, you could also hit right next to it that join button. There's 3 tiers and different ways you could support Unique Access starting at $1.99 a month. So if you're able to, we would greatly appreciate it. And that helps me take care of the staff and the people that help me bring Unique Access to you guys as often as possible. And of course, if you just want to hit us up one time, which we would also greatly appreciate, you could hit us directly on the Cash App at $Unique Access Ent. So any of those ways you could help us, subscribe, tell a friend to get a friend to subscribe, any of that would be tremendously appreciated as we keep trying to keep growing and get bigger and bigger and do better things and give you guys as much content as possible. Now today, we're here on the 1st and 15th, and I wanted to talk about, I've been thinking about this because there's so many different ways that we get music now. Sometimes there's loosies, which, I just look at as singles, which we used to get back in the day. But you got singles, aka loosies, you got EPs, you got albums, you got mixtapes, you got underground projects, you got collaborative projects, all these different things. But I was listening to some music and I was thinking like, man, back in the day, 1990 to 1994 was a rare time in rap history where we had these amazing EPs that were released, but some of them were used as bridge albums or bridge releases, because they weren't albums, bridge EPs that were the bridge between albums, or in some cases, like I'll talk about today, they were used to launch the careers. So sometimes artists back in the 80s in particular, but sometimes in the late 80s, early 90s, you would get a singles deal, which meant that you would sign for a single and then have the option to do an album if the single was received well by whatever metrics that the label was using at the time. A lot of artists starting in this early 1990-esque era started putting out EPs to launch their careers as well. So as I was thinking about it, I was like, man, this would be a great episode for the 1st and 15th. So one of the first, if not the first one that I remember that really set it off was 100 Miles and Running. N.W.A had amazing songs that could have stood on their own and that are great as album tracks, one of which, of course, is the title track. But then on the Real Brothers song, which was also on Brothers for Life a year later, those 2 songs in particular started these references of what was going on with Ice Cube and leaving N.W.A. And it was clear from what Ren, Eazy, and Dre were saying that it was not cool. Things were not cool with Cube, and they were not happy with him or the situation. And this was, before the internet, this was before social media, this was before even a lot of interviews that we had example and opportunity to see, because there weren't that many outlets on video or even in magazines in 1990. This was the start of the explosion of all that type of media with Yo MTV Raps, with Rap City, The Source, and other publications that started dedicating more and more space, time, airtime, or pages to rap, and the explosion of the rap magazines as well. But this was still early in the game. Ice Cube's Kill It Will, and this came out in 1990. And this was the first project that came out after Straight Outta Compton and America's Most Wanted, and it really was a bridge to what was going on with Cube, because we didn't hear much about him, but he wanted to keep everything going. And with Kill It Will, this showed to me the power of what EPs were going to be over these next several years, because sometimes artists would do remixes or just release songs or different things. But no, Ice Cube had that stuff on Kill It Will, but he also had Jackin' for Beats, which is a very innovative, distinctive single, crazy production on there. And then one of my favorite song on the EP was Dead Homies, which to me is a brilliant, very insightful examination of not only gang violence, but violence in the hood in general, and shows a lot of the pain and the destruction that it was causing. And Cube, coming off of America's Most Wanted, had already established himself as one of rap's premier social commentators. And Dead Homies, I thought, was a brilliant extension of that, as was the product. So right there, you got 3 songs on Kill It Will. Ice Cube is bridging the gap between what's going on with America's Most Wanted and setting the stage for, in my opinion, his best album, Death Certificate, which was going to come out the following year. And it really just showed, like, man, Ice Cube not only put out a great album, but right after that, he's keeping the streets hot. And like sometimes now people will do a mixtape in between stuff or a shorter thing, but Ice Cube was ahead of the game, ahead of the curve back in 1990. Ruthless Records, I guess, saw how powerful this was, because some of the other ones I'm going to talk about today definitely came out directly, I think, because of the success of 100 Miles and Running. Eazy-E probably saw, like, look, we could do a few songs and make a gang of money because you can sell it for more than a single. It's only a few songs, and then that helps us keep our excitement going while we're in between albums. Now, one of the more interesting ones, because it was a very different group and a very different approach, was Pete Rock and C.L. Smooth's All Sold Out, which came out the following year, June of 91. And this was the introduction of The Creator. Of course, was the biggest single off of there. They had a video for it and all that. But to me, Pete Rock had been, getting things going in the game. And this was interesting because, unlike Ice Cube and N.W.A, Ice Cube was on Priority at the time and N.W.A was on Ruthless Priority, Pete Rock and C.L. Smooth were on Elektra. So not only, and they're from New York. So there's a lot of differences going on. And I thought it was intriguing and very different because Elektra Records, the label that Pete Rock and C.L. Smooth were on at the time, didn't go this route with some of their earlier releases, most notably Brand Nubian. So I was like, that's kind of interesting that they're doing this. But right on the heels of Pete Rock and C.L. Smooth kind of coming out, we go to Above the Law with Vocally Pimpin'. Now, Above the Law put out Living Like Hustlers on Epic Records, and Vocally Pimpin' was on Epic Records. But right after this, the following year, Black Mafia Life was on Giant through Ruthless. So they were going through a label thing, which I have never gotten the full story of. But with Vocally Pimpin', you get the For the Funk of It, which to me not only is an amazing song, but that starts really what we are getting to understand and later get to know as G-Funk, as they do on Black Mafia Life, as Dr. Dre does on The Chronic, as Dr. Dre does on Doggy Style from Snoop Doggy Dogg, and Warren G with the Regulated G-Funk era. To me, it all traces back to Vocally Pimpin' and For the Funk of It, which they had multiple mixes of, multiple versions on the EP. And to me, like N.W.A had done, it really bridged the gap and kind of was a placeholder for Above the Law as they were working on their album. Little did I know they weren't going to be on Epic anymore. But regardless, it just set the stage and kept people, rather than a 2-year delay from Above the Law, we got this bridge Vocally Pimpin' project between 1990 and at least for me, I got Black Mafia Life in 92, if I remember correctly, even though I think people are saying it came out at the beginning of 93. But either way, I thought that was interesting. And then also in 91, we have Digital Underground with This Is an EP release coming off of all their success. But of course, most notably, the reason why this EP is so valuable and important is from our same song, which of course introduces their protege offshoot, Tupac Shakur, to the world. So I was like, man, now there's this glut of EPs that are coming out, and most of them are from the West Coast. But much to my pleasure, even though I was disappointed that it was so short because I loved it so much, was Showbiz and AG's Soul Clap. Now, they had released it initially independently on Showbiz Records, but then when it came back in March of 92, it was through Payday, which was having a lot of success at the time. And I just remember, like, man, Showbiz and AG, it's another Digging in the Crates thing. And that crew started getting more prominence because of what Showbiz and AG were able to do with Soul Clap. And, I love the instrumentals, the fact that they had those on there. I love the fact that Soul Clap is such a great song. And I liked Andre the Giant, just AG was just, he was fun to listen to. And then Showbiz, I think, is one of those guys that is such a amazing producer that doesn't get a lot of shine. So, at this time, the main disappointment was I always wanted more music instead of less. So getting a Soul Clap set up Runaway Slave that came out, of course, which is a brilliant album, but I was like, man, I wish I could have heard more of Soul Clap because it was so good. I had a similar thought with MC Ren's Kiss My Black Ass because to me, MC Ren was so incredible and stood out so much with N.W.A. And then with the dissolution of N.W.A. after the Brothers for Life album in 91, I was wondering what was going to happen with Ren. And then he came back in June of 92 with the Kiss My Black Ass. And we have The Final Frontier. We have Behind the Scenes. So Ren was doing his super hardcore stuff. He was continuing the storytelling that he had displayed since the beginning on Straight Outta Compton. And I was just glad to see Ren kind of stepping up, and the fact that it did so well commercially going platinum made me realize that I wasn't the only one that was excited to hear more of what MC Ren had to offer. So for all those reasons, I was very excited. And, you know, it just seeing these types of projects coming out, and this is now 3 years in the making with 1990, 91, and now 92 with MC Ren, it just showed that this was a movement, and a lot of it, again, like I said, was coming out on Ruthless Records. And the next one, of course, also was, which was Eazy-E 5150 Home of the Sick, which came out at the end of 92, right after or right around the time of The Chronic, which I think was no accident. You know, Eazy-E, if anything, was a shrewd marketing business guy, so he understood if Dr. Dre has just released his album, people are going to be looking for the stuff that we had done together, and they'd probably also be looking for, they might be visiting Eazy Does It, so why not put out an EP real quick so I can get some extra money, which he did with 5150 Home for the Sick. And Only If You Want It is my favorite song on there. Eazy-E was starting to branch out and collaborate with a lot of people, Tretch from Naughty by Nature and KG on that song in particular. But it also, since Eazy-E famously, admittedly, or whatever, wasn't looking at himself, and people didn't really look at him as an artist per se, which I think is ridiculous, because Eazy Does It, I think, is one of the best rap albums ever made. But that was the reality and the perception at the time, and 5150 showed, you know, he was still going to be a viable artist. He was still going to be putting out music, and it didn't matter in that sense that Dr. Dre had left. The train wasn't slowing down and wasn't stopping, and Ruthless was still a viable, fully functioning label that at that point was able to shoulder the blows of losing Arabian Prince, losing Ice Cube, and then losing Dr. Dre. So Eazy-E was super smart for that. And then taking it back to the East Coast, another one that, again, I wish it was more than just an EP. And my good friend Amir Rahimi and me had just done an episode on the great debaters of this, and there's the link right there for the Beatnuts, the Intoxicated Demons EP. This was on Relativity Records. It came out in April of 93. And this is one of those things where it's a trio. You know, they're doing all their beats, Psycho S and Juju in particular. Of the three, Fashion is on there. It's got great stories. The drums on this EP are ridiculous, as is every single one of the beats. But this was one of those, through Psycho Dwarf, through Reign of the Tech, it's launching their career, and it's really setting the stage for, man, these dudes are wild. They got crazy beats, crazy choruses, and they're going to end up, of course, over the years becoming phenomenal producers that work with a lot of different artists. But this EP was a launching ground for them, for the Beatnuts. And it just was, even though when I got it, I think it has 11 tracks on it. So I was like, okay, great. This is the EP, but it's going to be a long one. But of course, half of those are skits. But nonetheless, I was just excited to hear it. And I was so happy that they were going to be putting out this music because it hit so hard, and I thought it was so good. And again, it came from an EP. So that continues, of course, with Eazy-E. You know, The Chronic and Doggy Style are blowing up, and I think Eazy-E did this again to coincide with the release of Snoop Dogg's Doggy Style. But in October of 93, Eazy-E put It's On Dr. Dre 187 I'm Killer EP, which is, of course, most famously known for The Real Motherfucking G's. Now, to me, you know, Eazy-E had been dissed all throughout The Chronic in the videos, especially on Dre Day in particular. And, you know, Eazy-E came back, and Real Motherfucking G's, I think, is post N.W.A, post the official crew. That's his most revered, beloved, and popular song. So, you know, that definitely showed his value in the marketplace. It showed people were still riding with Eazy-E. And, you know, BG Knockout, of course, and Dresser, you know, helped on that song too. And they were become part of the crew, but then also part of the beef that Dr. Dre and Death Row had with Ruthless and Eazy-E. And that was an unfortunate thing that we as fans didn't get to see them really reconcile before Eazy passed away in 95. But fortunately, before Eazy passed in 95, he launched his group, his biggest group ever, that was bigger than N.W.A, with an EP, and that's Bone Thugs and Harmony, coming out in June of 94 with Creeping on the Come Up. Now, this was huge at the time. I was going to college. I was at Xavier University in Cincinnati, Ohio, and Bone was so huge in Cincinnati. I cannot overstate that, is what I was trying to say. I cannot overstate how big Bone was in Ohio. And granted, they're from Cleveland, but in Cincinnati, Thuggish Ruggish Bone, the single, was huge. And I remember hearing that all the time. I remember hearing it coming out of cars. I remember hearing it at clubs. I remember hearing it at parties. Like, that was like the anthem, the theme. People love Thuggish Ruggish Bone. So, and that launched a group that sales-wise and influence-wise, sales-wise in particular, was bigger, more popular than N.W.A. And then influence-wise, I don't think anybody's more influential than N.W.A, but Bone certainly influenced a lot of people and caught a lot of praise, but also caught a lot of heat because people said they couldn't understand him, just like they said with Twister and other rappers, Tretch, many rappers, that, oh, we can't understand what they're saying. They're rapping too fast. They're singing. They're not rap. Whatever lunacy it was, that didn't matter because I liked the music, as did millions of other people. And of course, For the Love of Money is also on this EP, and Eazy-E raps on the song. It's you know, used from, and you can check the interview here I did with Yomo from Yomo and Malky. There's the link, but you can check the interview. Yomo and Malky had used that beat, originally produced by Yella, on their Are You Experienced album, but Bone redid it, made it a video, made it a single, and then that was another smash. So again, as I've shown through these different EPs, not only were these EPs shorter because it stands for extended play, so it was extended compared to a single, but not a long play like a LP, but, you know, Bone, Ice Cube, N.W.A, the Beatnuts, all these artists had so many songs that were known and that either became popular singles or that they later put on their album or that they did videos for, or all the above. And to me, that was the power of these EPs. As a music fan, as a consumer, I was disappointed because they were short and I wanted more music, especially if I was going to be buying it or putting it on a cassette or something. I didn't want to waste my tape or get this album and then, oh man, it's only, or this EP, and oh man, it's only got 3 or 4 new songs. But I wanted to get those 3 or 4 new songs, so I had to get them all. But I think that's the thing, as I think about how music is presented to us now. It's so much easier to make music. It's so much more universal to just anybody can make music, anybody can record. And I think back in this era, the Eazy-E's of the world in particular were starting to understand, like, why wait a year or 2 years in between albums? We can put something out in between and have huge success while we're in between albums. Or in the sense of Bone, we can launch an artist with an EP and see how it does. And then in Bone's instance, they became the biggest artists ever on Ruthless Records from a sales perspective, which to me shows the power of the EP and how back in those days, as long as it was good music and people liked it and supported it, it was going to lead to other opportunities. And Bone, you know, had an amazing run, and they're still doing stuff today. And Bone, as individuals and collectively, have put out some amazing, amazing material. So it's just a lot going on, and a lot of it comes from EPs, which is why I wanted to talk about them here on the 1st and 15th, because this 5-year window of 90 to 94 saw some raps, huge artists, some debut artists that became big, as we saw with Rock C.L Smooth, as we saw with the Beatnuts, as we saw with Showbiz A.G, as we see with Bone Thugs-n-Harmony, and then some of the established artists like N.W.A, Eazy-E, MC Ren, Digital Underground, and others, you know, really kept it moving, didn't lose their momentum while they were working on their subsequent album. And to me, that's super important, and just something that I think is valuable for us to think about and consider as, you know, we look at rap's evolution of the game. So that's what I want to talk about here in the 1st and 15th. Of course, I didn't mention every single EP that was released in this time or even soon thereafter, but these are the ones that really, to me, are the main ones, some of the main ones, etc., that help set the stage for a lot of the EPs that we get around this time and later. So anyway, there it is, y'all. I'm Soren Baker. Thank you for watching me on the 1st and 15th. Hit me down there in the comments. Let me know what you think. As always, please subscribe. Also, right down there and hit that join button if you can, please, to help support us here at Unique Access Entertainment. I'm Soren Baker. Thanks for checking us out, and I look forward to next time.
In the beginning, hip-hop was ruled by the East Coast. Then the West Coast rose to prominence thanks to gangster rap.
Straight out of Compton, crazy motherfucker named Ice Cube.
Hip-hop changed the world. Gangster rap changed the narrative.
I'm representing for the gangsters all across the world.
And then changed the world again.
'Cause I'll come and take your life away.
The history of gangster rap features unheard stories, unseen photos and documents, all with exclusive interviews from the founders and players who shaped gangster rap.
I think a real gangster rapper has to scare you a little bit.
The history of gangster rap written by veteran rap journalist Soren Baker. In stores now.
Yo, what up? This is DJ Quick. Be sure to pick up my homeboy Soren Baker's book, The History of Gangster Rap, if you really want to know what we do.